Good afternoon and welcome to Biztech's Asian Midday Market Watch. Today, our guest is Vishnu, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank. Now, and he's dialing in out of Singapore. Now, Vishnu, as always, great to have you on the show.
I insist the pleasure is mine, Brian. So always good to be here on a Monday.
Now, first, let's start with taking a look at crypto markets. Bitcoin is at 40,921. It's down 2.28%. Ethereum is at 2,846.7. It's down 2.46%. Now, looking across to regional markets, now we start with the SGX, which is at 3,336.58. It is up 0.18%. Markets in Japan are closed today for a holiday. And across other markets, we have the KLCI, which is at 1,587.54. It's down 0.23%. Shanghai is at 3,248.79. It's down 0.07%. The ASX All Ordinaries is at 7,570.4. It's down 0.01%. The Hang Seng is at 21,339. It's down 0.34%. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is at 2,696.65. It's down 0.38%. Vishnu, what's your view on market performance this morning?
I think market performance is by and large positive, at least supported, although it is on a broader scale somewhat mixed. And I think that derives from two things. One is we had a very strong close in the US on Friday, so that followed through momentum in terms of buying stocks, and in a sense, the easiest knee jerk that markets can conceive today is to buy and be a little bit more risk on. However, there's also some context here. The reason why Friday ended on that high was we were building into two sets of hopes. One was to do with the Russia-Ukraine talks, and the other has got to do with China as well. So China's policy stimulus, particularly very hopeful that the regulatory tightening that we've seen in the tech sector would fade away. So these two together, I think, saw a nice jump in equities led by NASDAQ, in reflecting the China Tech Index there. And also last week, we saw oil softening into the middle of the week or so. That also lent to some initial momentum, although oil's rebound today is cause for pause, as are many other things, including the timelines and the probabilities around the Russia-Ukraine talks.
Okay, and speaking of oil, Brent is up to 111 this morning. So it's really had a sharp bump back up. But Vishnu, what are some of the key points that you highlighted in your commentary today?
Well, I think the commentary today was really about a 50-50 week, so to speak. And there are two dimensions to it. One is having had that relief rally last week, this week, I think markets are going to be more 50-50, really depending on the outcomes of the Russia-Ukraine talks. Also, how quickly oil rebounds can also have a little bit of a dampening effect, particularly in this part of the world, in EM Asia, outside of Malaysia, Australia, and to a lesser extent, Indonesia, I suppose. So those are the 50-50 aspects. The other aspect is, of course, a follow-through from last week's FOMC. So last week, the Federal Reserve meeting, we saw them hiking by 25 basis points. But the key thing is, it was a very aggressive outlook with a total of 175 basis points of hikes baked in for this year. So markets had framed it as one hike per meeting. But what has happened since the FOMC meeting is that we've had at least three Fed speakers. Now that I've mentioned it, probably more will be coming out to say that they can very well envisage a 50 basis point move in the next meeting or next couple of meetings, given that that's the way inflation risks are shaping up. And what held them back in March was really the geopolitical uncertainty, which for all intents and purposes, markets are suggesting that it's being dialed back somewhat. So we need to bear in mind that much faster rate hikes alongside more Fed speakers suggesting that as early as May, they could start shrinking the balance sheet runoff, in other words, draining global liquidity. I think these are things that if markets pause to think about, they may be less emphatic about continued rallies and how far it may go. So there's some reassessment that may be, even if it's not due this week, I think will be falling due in the weeks to come.
Okay, and Vishnu, looking ahead to this week, what are some risks that concern you potentially, and also some key events and data points that perhaps could move markets?
But I think, of course, front and center in terms of risks is a blowout and spillover of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I mean, despite the hopes for talks and some positive remarks out of Turkey, that's one of them brokering the talks, we do see that the actual conflict in Ukraine is getting worse, with hypersonic missiles being used, so on and so forth. So on that front, that's a particular risk. On other fronts, I think it's going to be more of a relief week in the sense that markets are still drumming up the prospects of some kind of ceasefire, if not truce. There's also the aspect of giving China the benefit of doubt in terms of the policy stimulus that come through. So markets are probably going to be hopeful, and that's aided by the fact that the COVID outbreak in China hasn't been as bad as expected, and they're easing up some of the restrictions. So markets may be finding excuses, even if they can't find actual reasons, to say let's buy back from beaten down levels. And so this week will mostly be on the negative side. The negative surprise to watch for would be geopolitical risks, oil as well. But apart from that, I think it's a week in which markets are looking for opportunities because data calendar is fairly light in the G3 part of the world. In our part of the world, BSP has got a meeting. Vietnam has got Q1 GDP out. But really, I think headline risks are the main show that markets are watching. Everything is a sideshow. Everything else is a sideshow for now.
Now, Vishnu, as always, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show, and thank you very much for your insights.
My pleasure.
Now, we've been speaking to Vishnu Varadan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank on Biztech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. This video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thanks again for tuning in.